Shall we wait another couple of minutes for more participants?
You're recording.
Yeah, since there were troubles in connecting for several participants, let's wait another couple of minutes. One more minute. Seems my webcam is now working. Do you confirm?
Yes, we can see you now.
I'm not Strabic, but I have more than one screen, so my picture is on one screen and slides are on a different one. And well, we wait another more 2 minutes, so I guess we can start. Do you agree, Julia and Denise?
Yes, for me it's fine to start.
Yes, fine.
Good. So welcome everybody, especially the SoBigData people, and within which project SoBigData this awareness panel is organized by the Leader Lab. It's one of our tasks in the project to raise awareness not only among the participants to the project, but also to a broader audience. So this webinar, along with other webinars, will be recorded and put online for being used by everybody. As you can see, it's awareness panel number 1, and that announces that there will be a series of them, for which we have already a preliminary schedule. We'll see it later on, but we invite you all to connect with us. You can write directly to me, g.comandé, without an accent, it's my last name, at sant'annapisa.it. So just contact us to suggest topics on and problems you want to have discussed in awareness panel. I guess there's someone with the microphone on that shouldn't be on. So if you can mute, please, your microphone, that would be lovely. We are a little bit late, so we'll finish a little bit later. This first awareness panel is at the same time an introductory one to the broad range of issues, especially related to Datathons, and it's partially devoted to get more into the specifics of the data protection issues and opening to further issues for Datathons in particular. Okay, so we want to bring you towards legally attentive Datathons, which is basically the idea to be sure that what we are doing is done properly. Seems slow in moving of the slides.
Adesso sono.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So that's where we are trying to bring you towards more legally attentive data tools. Now, you know better than we do what a datathon is, but it's useful to have a very broad definition to discuss with, because we are discussing about datathons and basically they are competitions. They can be online, offline, with a challenge. The music is me. It was supposed to start later on. Normally it works on a research issue or a business case.
Giovanni, sorry, you are not sharing the presentation.
I'm sharing the video. You don't see it?
No.
Okay, I guess. All right. Can you see it now? I mean, the app says that I am sharing. Can you see the slides? No?
No.
Okay. Let's stop and start again then.
Yes, now yes.
Oh, that was saying that. Okay, now you see it, right?
Right.
Okay. So, very broadly speaking, datathon is normally a competition, online or offline, with a challenge. For other tasks, mostly research, can be also business cases. And basically, data scientists are called to work on real-world or synthetic data, for what matters, from different areas, machine learning, AI, and data science, broadly speaking. Now, the real issue is that in order to have a datathon, you need to have some specific things. So you need a data set, but to have a data set, you need data. And to have data, you basically need someone collecting and uploading them in the system, in the platform, wherever the actual datathon is run. So you do need a platform to run basically the datathon, and SoBigData Plus is a platform for that purpose. But of course, to have a platform, you need someone that creates it and manages it, governs it. This is a sort of a number of spillover effects on what we need to do behind the scenes. So when you participate in datathons, you normally see the rules of engagement, what are the contents of the challenge, you give some sort of consent to participate. But there is much more behind the scenes to have all this done and done properly. So, to keep doing it, it's not only an issue of personal data protection, so that we have to ensure that the data that are used, if there are personal data, are in line with the GDPR and the other data protection regulations. There's much, much more in that. And the usual disclaimer that we often see on platforms, like declaring that you as a data scientist or the platform itself is not liable for damages or any risk, is clearly not enough to avoid liability. So basically, a disclaimer per se doesn't really help. We need to establish the platform then to run the datathons, and to do that, you need a number of things. So we saw that we need data, we need platform, we need data sets, but in order to do that, for instance, you might need terms of service or a contract that basically compels those who contribute the data sets. So let's say an hospital is giving some data they have collected. So the uploader of the data needs to have a sort of agreement between the platform and the participants, those who upload, okay? And basically one of the terms, and that would be effective, not the disclaimer, is they have to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless, that's the technical language, the platform for any damages or costs in eventual lawsuits. So basically the point here is, if, let's say, Scuola Sant'Anna is uploading in the SoBigData++ platform a dataset we have collected and cured for the Datathons or for other purposes, into open science objectives, we need to comply with our rules, and we need to comply with the requirements from the platform. So, and there are a number of issues. If you look to number 3, we need to govern also the intellectual properties surrounding the data. So, for instance, we have to establish whether or not that dataset is usable for which purposes, not only for purposes of personal data protection, if personal data are involved, but also to avoid breaches of intellectual property. A traditional example is we, as data scientists, often assume that what is available on internet is free. We can use it. That's not the case, neither from the intellectual property point of view, nor from a personal data protection point of view. Because unless those data falls within specific exemptions, we need to have a legal basis to further process those data. So the first actor is who run and governs the platform. Another set of actors and players are those who provide the data sets, what we call the uploader of the data in the platform. And then there are users. In a Datathon, a user, for instance, is a data scientist, is called to answer to a challenge, people in the team. And again, it must be clear what is the relationship between the user, those who access the platform, those who participate in the Datathons, and those who are gathering, provider infrastructure, what we call the platform. So as you begin to see, there are a number of relationships that need to be somehow regulated and taken into account. That's not that difficult, but needs to be done to give certainty to all players. And the first certainty is to establish basically the borderlines. What is a liability? Who has to do what? The platform, the user, the uploader, and to establish clearly what are those boundaries. So, for instance, what are the applicable legal rules? As you know, very recently, the privacy shield for the transborder data flows between EU and US has been struck down by European courts. So that basis for data transfer is now questionable. We have to find out different legal basis for transfer, for instance, to the US. We need to make clear and that we are going at the heart of the issues for each and every data scientist. What is basically the role, duties, eventually liabilities, and eventually rights of the individual data scientists which are involved in curing the data sets, for instance, for a specific data zones, for instance. Now, all of this basically has a very basic requirement, that is to have clear who has, to a large extent, in quotation marks, property on the platform. Because there is a difference. There are a number of implications on who is running the show, I mean, in the platform, for instance. So, since all those clarifications need to have a departure point, which is who is the owner, so to speak, of the platform, it's important So I just provide you two very quick examples. And thinking as SoBigData as an example, SoBigData++. So let's assume for a moment that the platform is a shared property. I mean, I'm using property not in a technical sense here, just to make sure that everybody understands. So more partners on the platform. So we do need, for instance, as an implication, to have shared terms and conditions for the management of IP. That's not probably compulsory, but highly recommended in order to allocate the intellectual property rights also for publications purposes. If all partners, for instance, own the platform, so if all the partners in SoBigData, to stick to the example, are collectively deciding what to do with data, what data can be uploaded, what cannot, what kind of use can be done. So, for instance, in that case, they would need, and that's compulsory, it's we are obliged by law to have a contract to manage this joint controllership of personal data. And therefore, we also need an agreement on what are different rights and duties. If only one partner, let's say that the actual host of the platform, the CNR, University of Pisa, Scuola Sant'Anna, whoever it is, it's considered as the owner of the platform in the non-technical sense I was defining them before, then we do not need a contract for the joint controllership, but we still need, for instance, to allocate the role of data processors to partners and recommendation on giving clear instructions in writing on what the different data processors that could be the partners, for instance, can do. So establishing a clear framework is necessary to understand what are our requirements we need to be fulfilling and to have a very simplified life when the research are actually run and performed. And against this background of clarifications, then, I mean, individual questions for data sciences in Datathons and beyond Datathons clearly are raised. This is just a very tentative list, very simple one that I'm sure each and every of you has been asking to herself or himself. So if there are biases in the datasets I am uploading or in the datasets I am using that create, for instance, discrimination or distorted results, am I liable? I mean, it's my duty to check for biases in the dataset I'm querying, for instance, or I'm provided, for instance, by someone else, a business asking me to develop a data analysis or an AI. Am I the one requested to check whether the dataset is fit for purpose, not only in technical and technological terms, but also from the ethical and legal standpoint? I mean, can I always use personal data if they are in the dataset just because they are provided to me? Or are those data on internet freely available? I anticipate this question. Very rarely that's a straightforward case, that is, data on internet are freely available. For instance, can I use posts on social networks? And there the answer is, it really depends on several issues you want to have a look to it. In using those elements, you might be breaching intellectual property rights for the platform, the social platform, or you might be breaching data subjects rights if you don't do it properly, okay? So let's assume that I have been collecting in the COVID-19 situation clinical data at a hospital. I mean, how can I use them for further research? Can I upload to a platform for a Datathon? Can I, you see, there's a number of issues. And how can I use data if they are pseudonymized? Am I clear what pseudonymization and anonymization means? If you see a lot of doubts, some questions that you are asking yourself continuously are exponential in number. Luckily enough, that's a commercial for the SoBigData++. The SoBigData++ is envisaged a system to try to give you answers on those issues. So SoBigData++ and within Work Package 2 has established a board for operational ethics and legality. You can read and take note of the email address, board@sobigdata.eu. That has a specific aim to help you answering those questions. There is a quote from the proposal, so that's our duty as SoBigData++. The board aims to offer an internal service to the project, so to all of you data scientists, capable to address ethical and legal problems in sharing data and executing social experiments on them. So, if you have any of those questions, you just write to the board, and the board in due time will help you sorting out a correct answer. You have here a list of people that will be shared that are belonging to this board, which is led by by Juan Manuel Duran. And very briefly, how it is inserted in the SoBigData++. It's the task 2.1, the Board of Operational Ethics and Legality, which basically, as a bottom up, is collecting the questions and giving answers. Those answers are then passed over to us, basically, to develop general answers. So from a specific problem, to which the board has given a practical answers, we extract an abstract to give a general guidelines to everybody within the project, and so producing opinions and guidelines which are then revised and approved by the high-level advisory board. And this way, we basically have this circle in the bottom up. You have a problem as a data scientist, a question and legal and ethical issues. You address the board give you an answer on that, pass over the answer to us in task 2.2. We generalize, complete, and in a dialogue with high-level advisory board, produce the general opinion and makes a sort of general guidelines for everybody, also outside the SoBigData community. That's the way it works. And before closing, again, just write us if you want to suggest awareness panels beyond the ones we are already programming. Also with a link with other research projects we are running at Scuola Sant'Anna, with Recreating Europe, for instance, with Legality Attentive data sciences projects, where both we are leading SPI in Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. So we will are already planning September an awareness panel on research infrastructure platform, going more in specific issues on data protection and IP, and another one in vulnerable participants, basically in research, not only related to data protection, but also to the vulnerability as such. But of course, we are open to different subject matters that you want to propose to us. And that's basically, we will ask you to react to these panels in order to improve them. But now I will stop, so we will try to get back some few moments, and I interrupt my connection, giving back the command to Denise Amram to keep going.
Yes, thank you, Giovanni. I give the floor to GiuliaSchneider, postdoc researcher at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. Giulia, are you there?
Thank you, Denise. I'm trying to share my screen. Desktop, here it is. Okay. It's loading. Okay, while the document is loading, it's a bit slowly. Some problems. Okay. I think I don't know why.
It's going. Waiting.
Okay,
Yeah.
So my talk will be about the risks and opportunities of Datathons, and exactly here it is. Perfect. So, okay. Denise, are you sharing the screen, or is it mine?
No, is it yours?
Okay, so I just have to skip. Okay, perfect. So, okay, now. Okay, so I'll delve into some and highlighting some of the risks and opportunity of Datathons, building upon what already Professor Comandé has highlighted on a very general level. And I will try to focus on some of the most challenging regulatory issues from both a data protection and an intellectual property standpoint. Indeed, as Professor Comandé has already highlighted, of course, the great opportunity lying in Datathons is, of course, the production of innovation, so the provision of concrete solutions through machine learning and data analysis to practical problems. Let's think, for example, about the great challenges raised to the health data analysis now in emergency times. But of course, these great opportunities in terms of innovation related to the massive analysis of data sets, of course, also raise some risks and some challenges that need to be addressed. First of all, of course, analyze the data sets entail most of the time personal data. So, of course, Datathons imply immediately some risks to the protection of the privacy of the involved data subjects. But from a proprietary law perspective, of course, there are also some problems in terms. There can be some problems in terms of unclear and ineffective allocation of property rights. So, when approaching the issue of Datathons, of course, both in case we have an analysis of a single established data set that is a simple Datathons, and most of all when it comes to the aggregation, that is the sharing of two or also more data sets into a so-called data pools, we have to accurately look at the data protection frameworks under the General Data Protection Regulation, and of course in terms of intellectual property laws, with the aim of identifying the relevant tools that can better address the risks and make Datathons more sustainable in terms of greater guarantees to the protection of the data subjects' rights and freedom, and in terms also of a clearer allocation of property rights that of both both beforehand and after the conduction of the analysis, that can render the innovation that related to Datathons more accessible and open, not only to the participants to the Datathons, but also maybe to other partners. And so, going deeper, going very quickly in the data protection challenges, we have to remember that the processing of personal data that a datathon implies is considered under the framework of the General Data Protection Regulation as a risky practice to data subjects' fundamental rights. And the General Data Protection Regulation clearly highlights that the massive processing of personal data can entail some concrete risks to data subjects' fundamental rights in terms of harms to data subjects, both that can be of both physical and material nature, but also of non-material nature, as for example damages to reputation. But what is very interesting to highlight is that the General Data Protection Regulation not only refers to outright damages, but also refers to risks in terms of economic or social disadvantages that can result from the massive analysis of data sets. So all the subjects involved in a datathon, that as Professor Comandé has highlighted, the complex nature of the relationships that can arise in the context of a datathon have to be clearly taken into account, the nature, the scope, the context and purposes of the process, in order to clearly identify the risks in terms of data protection, in terms of harms or more generally disadvantages to data subjects that can arise from the processing of such information. And of course, in carrying out this general assessment, it has to be clearly identified the nature of the data that are analyzed, which can be, for example, of sensitive nature, and the data protection framework indeed entails a special regulatory regime for so-called special categories of data that are sensitive data, as for example health data, that have to be treated under a precise framework. Indeed, Article 9 of the General Data Protection Regulation generally prohibits the processing of special categories of data unless the specific conditions are met. And for example, in case of the processing of these special categories of data for research purposes, the General Data Protection Regulation sets an enabling regime, that is, it allows the processing of special categories of data, provided certain conditions are met in terms of the enactment by data controllers of specific technical and organizational measures that are aimed at mitigating the risks that I just highlighted to data subjects' fundamental rights. So both in case of special categories of data, which is of course the category of higher risk, at higher risk of producing harms in case of processing, but also in case of normal, let's say, personal data, the subjects involved in a datathon, that can be both the partners, the participants, or the platform, depending of course on the contractual relationships that are arising in the case of the datathon, have to take into account the general, first of all, the general data protection principles in terms of identifying a lawful basis under Article 6 of the General Data Protection Regulation, taking into adequate account also the principle of fairness, which is a principle of substantial nature, requiring those subjects who carry out processing over personal data to take into adequate account the imbalances and the relations of powers that can arise in the context of processing activities, from which eventually harms or disadvantages can arise. And of course, the principle of accuracy is really important in terms of identification, both beforehand and in the context and during processing activities, of the emerging of eventual biases in terms of sampling biases, in terms of social historical biases, or in terms of statistically generated biases. Of course, transparency rules are the basic framework. The General Data Protection Regulation requires that the information related to the processing, that is, related to the features of the technological infrastructure that is used for the processing activities, has to be easily accessible and understandable by data subjects. And all these principles converge converge into the basic principle of accountability to which the processing activities in the context of a datathon must be compliant. That is, the controllers have not only to comply with data protection rules, but also have to be able to demonstrate compliance in terms, for example, of the conduction of a data protection impact assessment, which clearly identifies the risks that are identified in relation to a datathon. And these, for example, the data protection impact assessment is a document in which it is clearly highlighted. The risks related to processing are clearly envisaged and described, enabling also eventual, for example, auditing or inspection by the data protection authorities, which the General Data Protection Regulation sets. But these general data protection principles, which are to be taken into account at the first level of compliance, have a fundamental role. In terms of also the framing of another level of risk, that is, as I highlighted at the beginning, the unclear allocation of rights and thus also of liabilities of the parties involved in a datathon. Indeed, especially in case of a datathon that implies the aggregation, that is, the pooling of different data sets, problems of unclear and ineffective allocation of property rights, as I said at the beginning, may arise and are very likely to arise, since it is very difficult, especially in the context of machine learning processing activities, which generate always new secondary data or metadata. It is very difficult to identify not only, or even before the right allocation, it is very difficult to identify the specific data sets that are sort of that are flowing into the pools, which are always newly produced. This, of course, raises some new and rather unexplored challenges in terms of intellectual property law. So we're not anymore at the level of compliance, but we are at a level of defining a proper framework, because, of course, there are some intellectual property rights that at a theoretical level, of course, are, and also at the practical level, have a great importance. Let's think about trade secret protection for the protection of data sets, or copyright protection, for example, for the protection of the software that is employed for the processing. But it is, as the European Commission in the recent data strategy 2020 has highlighted, it is desirable that, and it is becoming a fundamental policy principle, that aggregated data sets are made as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So now, what does it mean? Of course, as closed as necessary, each partner will have the interest of maintaining the intellectual property, of maintaining the control of the data and also the technical infrastructure that it has developed. And of course, it will be willing to have control also during the datathon, and above all at the end of the datathons, in terms of control also of the results that are generated by the datathons. So so a trade-off is emerging between of course, the needs of open access and of shared information, but of course the proprietary interests of the involved parties. And for solving this trade-off at contractual level, there can be some tools that can be employed, and that can be sort of contextualized in the specific situation of the datathons. For example, the employment of francers, that is, of terms that ensure that the aggregated data sets are made accessible to every partner of the data, of every subject participating at the datathon, in terms that are fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory among the involved parties. And this is a term that is relevant at the beginning of a datathon in establishing access rights of the involved parties at an equal level. But also in terms of the access to the results that the datathon generates. For example, grant-back clauses could be employed, ensuring that all the members of a datathon are entitled to access the results that have been generated on the basis of the data that each partner has provided to the data pool and thus to the datathon. And finally, also technical standards of openness are of course very important in order to render the results of the datathon also interoperable and reusable in future research inquiries or activities. And for example, as primary technical standards of openness, for example, application programming interfaces are being promoted and incentivized also at European level. But in the definition of these terms that are taken from the traditional intellectual property framework, the above-mentioned data protection principle have of course a fundamental role and have to be taken as the fundamental benchmark of the design of these terms. And indeed, it is about data that we're talking about, most of the time personal data, and so of course in the definition of fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms, of course the basic principles of the basic data protection principles of fairness, transparency, accuracy that I have just mentioned have a fundamental role. So you see that interesting synergies are emerging between the data protection framework and the contractual terms that can be employed in the context of a datathon. A last question, of course, relates always through the lens of this trade-off, as open as possible, as close as necessary. Of course, when we're talking about intellectual property, so property rights and also grant-back clauses, which sort of entitle the members to a datathon to take control of the information generated from a datathon. This information may be required to be transparent if it's personal data under the data protection framework. Indeed, the GDPR sets specific transparency rules entitling the accessibility of the information related to the processing activities and thus to the datathon. So again, a conflict may arise between data protection transparency provision and intellectual property rights that are allocated under these terms and this framework that I had just highlighted. So this remains an open issue, but in general, although the GDPR says that the transparency provisions cannot undermine intellectual property rights, the balancing has to, in our opinion, to remain in favor of the guarantees of the freedom and fundamental rights of the involved data subjects, and so the data protection transparency provision has to be a benchmark that cannot be undermined. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Giulia, for your presentation. We are a bit late in the we are a bit late in the schedule, so I will go very quickly to present my final speech, just to show the I will check this, close this, and open this.
Okay.
I should be able to. Do you see the presentation? Giulia, can you please move the circle up to my name?
The circle?
Il pallino Giulia Schneider sulla sinistra che ti fa da relatrice. Se me lo passi, tieni premuto e me lo passi, altrimenti non posso condividere lo schermo.
Pallino. Non lo vedo.
Vedi i nomi dei partecipanti?
Sì.
Ok, sulla sinistra hai un pallino,
Ecco.
lo devi trasportare sopra da me.
Eccolo.
Ok.
Scusami, non l'avevo visto.
No, thank you. Se riusciamo a condividere il file. So very quickly, now that we have introduced, do you see the presentation? It is in this way. Okay, now do you see everything? Okay, now that we have understood what is a datathon and which are the main issues, legal and ethical issues that emerge from the exploratory activities and data analytics on big quantity of data, we are ready perhaps for a practical checklist that may be useful for data scientists, as we know that the dialogue between different expertise are a bit difficult in order to understand why we have to deal with data protection, with IP issues, and so on. Well, the main reason is related to the fact that we have to avoid disputes in terms of activity we're performing. But the theoretical basis is that we are in a legal system. We are in the EU system, and we have a EU Charter of Fundamental Rights that protect us as individuals and as also collective groups. In this perspective, what we are doing is not just to create papers or activities of compliance in order to Can you hear me?
Yes, now yes.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, here I am. So we are just protecting fundamental rights. In this perspective, we have a set of international charters and legislation that are aiming at identifying both rights and liberties to be protected, and how to deal with them, and how to enforce and enhance individual and collective rights. In this perspective, we have the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, that Giulia and Giovanni have already mentioned and illustrated, that are not just creating constraints to the data analytics or to our application, that is the Datathon, but that are just identifying how to proceed in order to protect our fundamental rights. And also, if we go down in the level, in the pyramid of our legal systems, we can see that there are the opportunity for each legal system to identify some specification and safeguards in order to provide the proper measures to allow data processing. Data processing that, as Giulia has already said, can be related and can deal with general data, but also to particular data, like the ones related to the health data. In that main content of classification of personal information, we have to distinguish which can be the safeguards in order to avoid direct harms to data subjects, but also indirect harms to data subjects. What we would like to stress with this awareness panel is that we know that according to your viewpoint, all your data are anonymous, or your data are big data, so there is no possibility to re-identify individual persons, but it is possible that during the activities that you perform for your research, you are going to identify some classifications, some clusters that can be misused, and so can be used for purposes that are not the main purposes of your research, which can be ethical, trustworthy, and with the connected to the human being progress. So just to identify which are the steps in designing a Datathon, we can rely with a series of ethical legal issues that cannot be considered at the end of our Datathon activity. They shall be considered as a pillar of the Datathon design since the very beginning. So when we identify the issue to be investigated, the issue that the problem that we want to address, we are going to think about the possible vulnerabilities that can be developed in considering this kind of issue. If we consider the Datathon on health data, now we are all talking about the possibility of making data analytics considering the COVID-19 emergency in order to detect and to analyze what happened.
Denise, sorry to interrupt, but
yes?
I don't see scrolling your presentation.
Sorry?
I don't see your presentation moving forward. I don't know if it is my problem, but I don't see your presentation moving.
You don't see my presentation?
I see just the first page.
Okay. Why? Everything is blocked.
Do you see, Giulia?
No, I see that somebody has also written in that it.
Now we see.
I thought I didn't intervene because I thought it was just the introduction, but then you moved.
No, exactly.
Yes, of course, I was there. Sorry about this. Okay.
Good.
So
now
we organize. Sorry, I can't see anything because my computer is blocked. So
now we see.
I'm doing
slide number 3 to identify the issue to be investigated.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I was saying that when we identify the issue that we would like to investigate, we have to ask ourselves which can be the consequence on the doing research on this kind of issue. So we are now analyzing the COVID-19, this related to COVID-19, which can be the consequence, also negative consequence of a use that is not related to our own purpose. To analyze this kind of issue. The same thing if we consider another topic, for example, immigration, but also if we go to a more recreative topic, if we consider sport, well, which can be making analytics on sport can have some negative consequence on not only individuals, but also on groups, collective people in the future by using and misusing the research, our outcomes, our methodologies, what we develop during the research. This is the first step. The second step is to create the data set, and Giovanni and Giulia have already illustrated which are the main issues related to IP protection and data protection. And in this framework, we have to consider which kind of data set, which is the data flow, where it starts and where it goes, and which kind of data are included in this data set. And be sure that even if we are talking about anonymized or pseudo-anonymized data, we have to address some questions related to the opportunity or to the possibility to provide with technical measures, but also by aggregating with different data sets, having some outcomes that are not aligned with our main purposes or the purpose of our research. And then we have the issue to make the data flows available, interoperable, and also public in order to optimize the use of our research, of our analytics, and to share it. The principle is to share, to be open, to work on data in order to prove our methodologies and therefore to be consequential in the different steps of data analytics. And then we have the issue related to the step related to the launch of the analytics. And in this case, once that the barriers connected to the key anonymity or to the privacy preserving measures that are technical and you know better than us, you have to address the necessity to provide robust algorithms that can be tested with in terms of results in order goes beyond the human control, and so the use of artificial intelligence gives the results or the task that you have thought to perform. So in this step, you have to look more at the technical basis than to the ethical legal ones, but you have to have in mind that in the process of results and in the publishing of results, you come back to the risk of misuse of your research. All these levels, grounds of ethical, legal, or related risks are connected to what you may have to introduce in the famous and well-known papers you have to provide to the competent ethical committee or to the competent privacy committee or to the body who funds your research that may ask for more explanation, clarification, and for the documentation that proves your compliance. So in considering all these questions, does the data set include personal data? Are these data general or particular? Who is the data controller? Is there any agreement between the parties who participate to the data flow? Are data subjects aware? Who are the data subjects? In the case of a datathon on COVID-19 emergency, perhaps they are patients. What they know about their data and what they know about the reuse of their data for research and statistical purposes. And then, of course, there is the issue related to, do we know the meaning of all the previous concepts? Because as lawyers, we know that there is a difference between anonymized data, pseudonymized data, and how to balance in certain situations the different and to address the different organizational measures. But I know that sometimes we can deal with the concept of sensitive data without considering the real notion of data belonging to particular categories under Article 9 of GDPR. So there can be some concepts that are very technical from a legal viewpoint that then they pass in the common language in a different way and provide some consequences that are not the real consequences that we have to deal with in terms of compliance. That's why in the research centers and the universities and public administration, hospitals, and so on, there is this role of the data protection officer who has the task to train the employees in order to be compliant and also to explain the technical meaning of the concept related to the activities that are performed. So as far as you are mainly data scientists and we are lawyers with different backgrounds and so on, we can say that we are strong in trying to find out by design which are the organizational and technical measures to make our data flows that can be used for datathons or for other research and statistical purposes in order to protect their confidentiality, their availability, and their integrity, and to pursue the research main goals. But having in mind that we have perhaps to deal with ethics committee approval when we talk about health data flows, we have to, because healthcare system in Italy cannot give access to health data flows without an approval of an ethical committee. Then we have the technical measures that you apply in designing the technical part of your analytics, privacy-preserving techniques, the encryption, the pseudonymization, but you have to be accountable in identify them also while you update the dataset in a general platform like the one that can be the SoBigData ++1. And then there are all the agreements that have to be provided in terms of administrative activities that goes beyond the research activity, and that takes time and energies and, of course, human resources. How to prevent the misuse? Yes, the concept of misuse is when we have to avoid the risk, or at least mitigate the risk that someone can use your research, your outcomes for purposes that are not in line with the EU values or the democracy values that we share. And in these terms, what we can do, we can provide a technical robustness of the technical solution that you apply, and from our side, we can provide this awareness panel in order to stimulate the debate on these issues. So I will just stop here in order for the first datathon, and if I'm able to come back to the WebEx.
Thank you very much, Denise. Meanwhile, I'm trying to see whether there are questions already raised, and I think already Fosca is volunteering. Since many of you cannot intervene with the microphone, eventually you can try to intervene with the microphone. If it doesn't work, please write your questions in the chat, so we can take at least a few ones. And I'm still
sharing the desktop and okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now I stop.
So, Fosca, if I recall correctly, you can talk. So, Denise, can you activate the microphones, please?
Yeah.
Fosca is the first intervener.
Here we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you are not asking questions, please mute your microphone.
First, now you can speak, because I cannot hear everybody unless you.
Yeah, good. Go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. We can. So.
Okay, no. Thanks very much for this important webinar, because I think it's one of the major topics of SoBigData. We started 5 years ago with the manifesto Responsible Data Science, and we elaborated all the topics that you are mentioning today in those years, and we also produced a mock. I hope you also may have a check in the mock, the small course that we produced. If it's coherent with your presentation, maybe it would be helpful if you could also enrich. So I think that one important point for SoBigData is that we continue with this idea of having SoBigData is helping the data scientists in solving all the problems which are related to the legal and ethical issues. So we shouldn't scare the data scientists, but we should, in some sense, taking them by hand, helping them to solve the problems. As you were saying, Giovanni, at the beginning, we have set up some activities just in this case. And second point that I wanted to do, that you made the example on the COVID Datathons. I think that SoBigData should try really to do on this datathon an example of the fact that things are feasible. So we should we should really put our effort in making this realized, so that we will demonstrate that all these, so taking care of ethics and legal issues, it's something which is not, shouldn't scare, but it's something which is feasible. So that's my message to the community.
Excellent, thank you. I'm trying to see in the chat for questions, but I don't see, so you can directly unmute your microphones if you have questions or comments to provide, to give. I understand we went long because of the delay at the beginning, and I don't want to call you directly, although I'm really tempted.
Tommaso or Salvo, before asking something?
Yeah, I think also Angelo Facchini was one of the first raising problems issues, so that should go to the board, for instance. So that might be a good idea to discuss. Two shy people.
No, if I may add a general comment on what Fosca is saying, that the legal framework and the legal matters should not scare participants in engaging in datathons, and the law has not to scare, but rather to be a further aspect to be taken into consideration. I think that the SoBigData++ experience shall give us also the opportunity to reflect of legal opportunities entailed in datathons, in terms of defining new frameworks also, which are emerging as the interaction between data protection and intellectual property related terms, contractual terms. So also this is a further opportunity in respect to the scientific, other scientific opportunities.
Yeah, I think SoBigData++ can really set an example on data counts, and it has a very important role. There is a very widespread perception, for instance, that data protection, in compliance with the legal framework, and especially the European legal framework, is impairing research. We have evidence to the contrary, that the perception that, for instance, the GDPR is preventing COVID-19 research data to be shared, which is really widespread. I mean, I cannot give confidential information on that, but trust me, the largest institutions in the world share the view that they cannot get data from Europe, which is flatly wrong. There are a number of tools which are not too complicated, especially if you are organized in a responsible way to deal with them. And that's basically a sort of flagship for SoBigData++, responsible AI, responsible data science. But SoBigData++ and everybody needs to organize themselves, and everything is possible. No limits to our imagination. It requires hard work, that's for sure, but it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at least my manifesto was during the SoBigData. So we these 5 years, we managed to convince and to realize some data sets which are responsible, and having a responsible data science in some of the data sets that we have. So. And it was convincing argument that we have taken care of all the difficult parts, where the difficult parts are not the technical ones for the data scientists, but the legal ones. So we have the responsibility of changing this mentality. So also this part can be done. It's I mean, those are steps that to be followed. I mean, and that's it. So we are capable of implementing very difficult algorithms. We can also implement several formal steps that are required by the legal framework. We need to have you on board, of course, such that also the legal figures which have in mind the importance of to make the data free. So which kind of advances of science it's sharing the data can provoke. So I think that we will do important things.
Excellent. So our time is basically up. If there are no pressing questions that I don't see in chat, I think we can close this first awareness panel. I'm really grateful to both Denise and Giulia for their excellent presentation that definitely raised awareness. I hope we didn't scare you, but just to close with a message of hope. Data protection rules, the legal framework is there to help sharing data. It's there to help research, not to prevent it. But at the same time, the legal framework is there to protect fundamental rights and liberties. And the two things, free flow of data and protection of fundamental rights, are not opponents. They are allies. And we need to have everybody understand it and move accordingly. Thank you again to everybody. And the next appointment will be in September. Please write us if you have topics to propose. And don't forget to write to the board for your specific questions to get the answer. That's a service we have in SoBigData++, which is unique. So
Giovanni, thanks again. And just a question for September. Might we maybe pose also some prototypical examples, for example, that might be discussed?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
And
again,
also,
thanks very much.
And also, you will receive a survey developed on the WP2 in the next weeks in order to together with the awareness panels and the survey to provide a bottom-up approach as required in the project. So,
okay, then we should also share this with Erica and the journalists, so that may see also if they can transform this in some communication. You know, Erica Wildegar, she wants to organize something for November at the European Parliament.
At the European Parliament, yes.
Yeah, on COVID. So, yeah, once you have done this deliverable, we will share and see further steps also on this side.
Yeah, she already has access to the tentative survey.
Okay, thanks very much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Should we do, Denise?
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Se ci riesco, sì.